My father offered me money to leave you. Not a threat, not a command. Money. Do you understand the insult hidden inside that? You never knew how cheaply they measure what they cannot control. And still, he thought I would accept. Tell me, what price do you think he placed on you, on us? Because what you don't see is how calmly he said it, how easily the words fell from a mouth that has decided the fate of kingdoms, as if love could be weighed like gold, as if you could be reduced to numbers scratched onto parchment. And still, I stood there listening, not because I considered it, but because I needed to hear how far he would go. You would have hated that room. Marble too cold, silence too sharp, a throne that feels less like power and more like a warning. And there I was, being offered everything I was already born into, in exchange for the only thing I ever chose. You. Tell me, does that frighten you? That the most powerful man in this empire sees you as something that can be bought away from me? Because it should, not because he is wrong, but because he believes he is right. And still, I said nothing, not at first. I let the silence stretch, let him believe he was close to winning. But what you don't see is that in that silence, something changed, something irreversible, because for the first time, I saw exactly what I would have to destroy to keep you, and I did not look away. Do you remember when you once told me you owned nothing and that made you free? I didn't understand you then. I thought freedom was something granted, something defined by borders and crowns and power. You laughed at me, quietly, softly, like you already knew something I didn't. And still, you stayed. Tell me, did you ever realize how much that unsettled me? That someone could stand in front of a prince and not want anything from him? Because what you don't see is that I had never been looked at like that before. Not as a ruler, not as a future king, just as someone who could be left behind. And still, you didn't leave immediately. You lingered. You let me believe, just for a moment, that I could exist outside the weight of everything I was born into, that I could choose something for myself, something real, that something was you. And now I understand what you meant. You had nothing, so you could not be bought, and I had everything, so they thought I could be. You see the difference now? Do you see why his offer meant nothing to me? Because you were the only thing in my life that did not come with a price, and still they tried to give you one. The court knows not everything, but enough. They sense the shift, the tension, the way my decisions no longer align with their expectations. You never knew how quickly loyalty becomes suspicion when a prince begins to choose for himself. And still, they watch, they whisper, they calculate. Tell me, do you understand what you've become to them? Not a person, not a woman, a variable, a risk, a fracture in a system built on control. Because what you don't see is that my father's offer was not the beginning, it was the final attempt at peace. Everything that follows will not be peaceful, and still, I stand here knowing exactly what is coming. Pressure, manipulation, perhaps even force, because empires do not bend for love. They break it, they erase it, they rewrite it into something that serves them. And you are the part they cannot rewrite. That is why you are dangerous. That is why they want you gone. And still, I have not stepped back, not even once. Tell me, when they come closer, when the weight of this world presses against you the way it presses against me, will you stand? Or will you finally understand why I should have taken that offer and walked away? There is a version of this story where I accept, where I take what he offered, where I let you become a memory softened by distance and time. You never knew how easy that path would be. No conflict, no war, no fracture in the bloodline, just silence and still. I rejected it. Do you understand what that means? It means I chose the harder ending, the darker one, the one that does not promise survival for either of us. Because what you don't see is that love like this does not coexist with power. It challenges it, it threatens it, it forces it to reveal what it truly is. And now I am seeing everything clearly. The crown, the throne, the empire, none of it feels the same anymore. Not after that moment, not after realizing they would rather buy me away from you than face what I might become if I stay. And still, I am staying. Not because I am certain of victory, not because I believe this ends well, but because walking away from you would make everything else meaningless. And I would rather destroy meaning itself than live without it. My father offered me money to leave you, and I refused. Not quietly, not carefully, completely. You never knew how final that moment felt, how it closed one life and opened another in the same breath. And still, I walked out of that room knowing there is no return from this. Tell me, do you feel it yet? That shift in the air, that subtle warning that everything is about to change, because what you don't see is that this is no longer about love alone. It is about consequence, about the cost of choosing something that was never meant to be chosen. And still, I choose you, even now, even knowing what it will bring. The court will move. My father will not forget. The empire will not forgive. And you will be pulled into a world that does not allow you to remain untouched. But listen to me carefully, because this is the only truth that matters now. I was given everything, and I walked away from it for you. So when the storm finally reaches us, when there is no more distance, no more illusion, no more safety left, do not ask me why I didn't let you go, because I already made that choice, and I will make it again, every time. You think refusal ends things, don't you? That saying no draws a line the world must respect. You never knew how refusal in a palace like mine is not an ending, it is an invitation. And still, you imagine that moment as clean, decisive, final. It wasn't. Tell me, have you ever seen silence turn sharp? Because that is what followed. Not anger, not rage, just a quiet that cut deeper than any threat. What you don't see is that my father does not repeat offers. He replaces them with outcomes. And I walked away from the last peaceful one. And still, I felt something else beneath it. Not fear, not regret, something colder. Clarity. The kind that strips away doubt and leaves only direction. You should be afraid of that. Not for me, for what I will become, with nothing left to lose. Because now there are no softer paths, no negotiations, no careful distance between you and the world I come from, only collision. And still, I find myself thinking of you as you were before all this, unaware, untouched, free in ways I did not understand. But that version of you, it is already fading, and I am the reason why. Do you remember the way you used to walk through the palace corridors like they didn't belong to anyone? Like marble and gold meant nothing compared to the air you breathed? You never knew how that unsettled the court, how they watched you with quiet disbelief, and still, you never noticed. Tell me, did you ever realize how rare that was? To exist in a place built on hierarchy and ignore it completely? Because what you don't see is that you changed the way I saw everything. The throne felt smaller, the crown felt heavier, power felt less absolute, and still, I let you walk away from that world, believing it would return to what it was before you. It didn't. It never will, because now, every time I sit where I am expected to rule, I remember the way you looked at me without fear, without expectation, without price. And that is something no empire can compete with. Tell me, Do you still carry that version of yourself? Or has the weight of everything begun to reach you too? The first move has already been made. You won't see it, not yet. It will come quietly, disguised as coincidence, wrapped in something that feels almost harmless. You never knew how carefully power disguises its intentions, and still you will feel it. That slight shift, that moment where something doesn't quite make sense. Pay attention to that, because what you don't see is that every step you take now is being measured, not by me, but by those who wish to undo what I refuse to. And still, I am ahead of them, barely, just enough to keep you out of reach for now. But this is not a game that remains balanced for long. Eventually, something will give. Tell me when that moment comes, when the illusion of safety fractures completely. Will you come to me, or will you try to stand alone against something that was never meant to be faced alone? You once told me that love should never feel like war. I remember that. I remember the way you said it, like it was a truth the world had forgotten. You never knew how much that stayed with me. And still, here we are, on the edge of something that feels exactly like that. Tell me, does that mean we were wrong? Or does it mean the world we exist in was never built to allow something like us to survive peacefully? Because what you don't see is that I am not fighting for love. Not anymore. I am fighting because of it. Because it revealed something in me that cannot be silenced, cannot be negotiated, cannot be bought. And still, that makes me dangerous, not just to my enemies, but to everything I was meant to protect. And you are at the center of that transformation, the reason, the cause, the consequence. Tell me, can you live with that? Can you stand beside something that is no longer entirely controlled? And now the cost of refusing is beginning to show, not all at once, not openly, but it is there, in the way the palace breathes differently, in the way the court shifts around me, like something adjusting to a new reality. You never knew how quickly everything can change without a single word being spoken. And still, I see it, I feel it, and I am ready for it. Because what you don't see is that I have already crossed the point where fear could stop me. That moment passed when I chose you over everything else, and now there is only forward, only consequence, only the path I have already stepped onto. Tell me, will you meet me there, or will you wait until that path reaches you on its own? Because it will. It always does. And when it does, there will be no more offers, no more choices, only truth, only us. You've started to notice it now, haven't you? The way ordinary things feel slightly altered, as if the world you trusted has shifted just enough to make you question it. You never knew how subtle pressure could be, and still you try to dismiss it. Tell me, how many times have you paused today, sensing something just beyond your understanding? Because what you don't see is that this is how it begins, not with force, but with presence. A quiet reminder that you are no longer untouched, and still I am holding them back. For now, that is the only truth you must not ignore. Everything that has not happened yet has not happened because I have not allowed it. But that is strange. It is not endless. It cannot be, because every second I hold this balance, something else weakens, something else prepares to break. And when it does, the shift will not be subtle anymore. It will be undeniable. And you will have to decide whether to run from it or step into it. There is something I haven't told you about that moment in the throne room. Something I chose not to write, not to soften, but to delay. You never knew how much power lies in what is left unsaid. And still, I cannot keep it from you now. Tell me, what do you think I saw in his eyes when I refused? Not anger, not disappointment, recognition. As if in that instant he finally understood what I was becoming. And that is what unsettled him. Because what you don't see is that I am no longer predictable to him, no longer shaped by the expectations he built into me. And still, that makes me dangerous, not just to him, but to the entire structure that depends on control. And you are the fracture that caused it, the single deviation that changed everything. Tell me, can you carry that truth, that this empire is beginning to shift because I chose you? You are closer to the center of this than you realize, not by distance, but by consequence. You never knew how quickly a single choice could draw everything toward it. And still, you stand at the edge, believing you are outside of it. You are not. Tell me, do you feel the pull now, stronger than before, less like a thought, more like a direction? Because what you don't see is that every path is beginning to lead you toward the same place, toward me, toward this. And still, you try to choose differently, to step away. But even that, even resistance, becomes part of the movement. That is how complete this has become. There is no action you can take that does not bring you closer. And that is what makes this inevitable. There will be a moment soon, not distant, not uncertain, a moment where everything becomes visible. You never knew how quickly hidden forces reveal themselves once they are pushed far enough. And still, that moment approaches. Tell me, when it comes, when you finally see the full weight of what surrounds you, will you hesitate? Or will you finally understand why I could never walk away? Because what you don't see is that this was never a simple choice between love and duty. It was a choice between truth and illusion. And I chose truth. Even knowing what it would cost, even knowing it would pull you into something you never asked for. And still, I would choose it again, every time, without hesitation, without regret. And now everything that follows is the price of my refusal. Not paid all at once, but in moments, in shifts, in consequences that unfold with quiet precision. You never knew how long a single decision could echo. And still, you are hearing it now, feeling it, becoming part of it. Tell me, do you understand yet that this does not end with distance? It does not fade with time. It does not resolve into something easier. Because what you don't see is that this only moves forward, only deepens, only becomes more real with every second. And now, there is nothing left to stop it, nothing left to soften it, only the truth of what we have become. And when the moment finally comes, when there is no more space left between us and everything we have set into motion, you will understand the one thing I realized in that throne room. There was never a version of this where I chose anything over you. You're beginning to hear it now, aren't you? Like a sound, something beneath it. A tension in the air, like the world is holding its breath around you. You never knew how pressure announces itself without a voice. And still, you try to continue as if nothing has changed. Tell me, how long do you think that will last? Because what you don't see is that the moment I refused him, the world you were living in quietly stopped being yours alone. It became contested, measured, watched, and still I have delayed the inevitable, not for power, not for strategy, for you. But even that, even my protection has limits. Every empire does, every prince does, and the closer we move to that limit, the sharper everything becomes. The shadows grow heavier, the silence grows louder, and you begin to feel it in ways you cannot explain. That is not fear, that is awareness awakening. And once it awakens, it never sleeps again. There is something changing inside you too. You won't admit it yet, but I can feel it from here. That shift in how you think of me, not as someone distant, but as something approaching. You never knew how perception transforms before reality does. And still, you tried to hold on to the idea of me as I was, the version you left behind. But that version, it no longer exists. Tell me, when you think of me now, what do you see? Because what you don't see is that I have already stepped beyond that image. I am no longer waiting in memory. I am moving in certainty. And still, you hesitate to accept that. Because if you do, if you truly accept it, then everything becomes immediate, real, unavoidable. And that is what you fear most. Not me, not the danger, the inevitability of it all. Distance between us is shrinking, not in miles, in meaning. You never knew how distance can collapse without a single step being taken. And still, you measure it as if it still protects you. It doesn't. Not anymore. Tell me, do you feel how close everything is now? That strange sense that something is about to break through, to cross the final barrier between thought and reality? Because what you don't see is that the moment of confrontation is no longer approaching, it is forming right now, around you, around me, around everything we have set into motion. And once it forms completely, there will be no pause left, no space to reconsider, only impact. And still, I have not stopped it. I could try, I could delay it further, but I won't, because there is a truth you must face without my interference, that you were never outside of this, you were always at its center. You are not untouched anymore. You feel it in the way your thoughts return to the same place, the same questions, the same inevitability. You never knew how quickly certainty replaces doubt once it begins, and still you resist giving it a name. Tell me, is it fear, or is it something deeper, something that feels like recognition? Because what you don't see is that this is not something new. It only feels new because you are finally allowing yourself to see it. But it has always been there, from the first moment, from the first look, from the first time you realized you could walk away and didn't. And still, you try to believe this is something that can be undone. It cannot, not now, not ever, because you are already changed, already shaped by what we have become. Everything since that moment has been moving toward this. Not a choice, not a question, a conclusion. You never knew how quickly fate settles once it decides. And still, you try to stand outside of it, but you can't. Because what you don't see is that there is no outside left. Only this, only us, only the path that has been closing around us with every decision we made. And now it is complete. There is no more distance to protect you, no more silence to hide in, no more illusion to hold on to, only truth, only consequence, only the moment where everything becomes real. Tell me when that moment arrives, when I am no longer a thought, no longer a memory, but standing before you, will you still try to walk away? Or will you finally understand what I understood the moment I refused him, that there was never a version of this where I chose anything but you? You're standing on the edge of it now, aren't you? That quiet realization that something is about to change in a way you cannot control. You never knew how unmistakable that feeling becomes once it arrives. And still, you try to steady yourself, to convince your heart that this is just a passing storm. Tell me, when has anything between us ever been temporary? Because what you don't see is that this moment, this exact breath you are holding, it has been building for far longer than you understand. Every choice, every silence, every time you turned away and every time I didn't follow, it all led here. And still, you wonder if there is another path. There isn't, not anymore. That possibility ended the moment I refused him. And now, the world is rearranging itself around that refusal, around you, around us. You feel it in the way your thoughts won't settle, in the way your instincts are no longer calm. That is not fear alone, that is recognition. And once recognition takes hold, it does not release you, not until you face what it demands. You're thinking of leaving again, aren't you? Not physically, not yet, but in your mind, that familiar instinct to step back, to create space, to protect yourself from something that feels too consuming. You never knew how transparent that instinct would become to me. And still, I let you have it before. I let you go. Tell me, do you think I will do that again? Because what you don't see is that everything has changed since then. I am no longer standing where I was. I am no longer someone who waits quietly for your return. I have crossed something, something that does not allow me to pretend distance is acceptable. And still, I am giving you this moment, this final illusion of choice, not because you can truly escape, but because I want you to understand what you are choosing when you stay or when you try to leave again. Because this time, leaving will not mean freedom, it will mean consequence. The court is no longer patient. You wouldn't hear it, but I do. The shifting alliances, the careful conversations that stop when I enter the room. You never knew how quickly power isolates when it begins to deviate. And still, I stand alone in it, not because I am weak, but because I have chosen something they cannot control. You. Tell me, do you understand what that makes you now? Not just a risk, but a symbol, a defiance they cannot tolerate. And still, I have not hidden you, not completely, because hiding you would mean admitting you are something to be ashamed of. And you are not. You never were. What you don't see is that this has already become larger than us, larger than love, larger than choice. It is becoming a fracture in the foundation of everything I was meant to uphold. And once a fracture begins, it does not simply close, it spreads. You once believed I belonged to the throne, that everything I was would always bend back toward it, no matter how far I stepped away. You never knew how close you were to being right and how completely you would be proven wrong. And still, you hold on to that belief in some small way. Tell me, do you still think I will choose it in the end? Because what you don't see is that the throne has already begun to lose its hold on me, not in power, but in meaning. It feels different now, smaller, hollow in ways I cannot ignore. And you are the reason for that. The reason everything I was taught to value now feels incomplete. And still, that makes you dangerous, not because you threaten the empire directly, but because you have changed the one who was meant to protect it. And that is something no empire forgives easily. The final shape of that refusal is becoming clear, not as a single moment, but as something unfolding piece by piece, step by step. You never knew how slowly inevitability reveals itself. And still, you are beginning to see it now. The way every path leads back to the same place. The way every thought returns to the same truth. There is no version of this where we remain separate. Not anymore. Not after everything that has been set into motion. Tell me, do you feel how close it is? That final moment where everything we have avoided becomes real. Because what you don't see is that it is already here. Not in front of you, but around you, inside you, shaping what you will do next. And when you take that step, when you finally stop resisting what you already understand, you will realize something that was decided long before this began. You were never meant to be left behind. Not by me, not by this, not by what we have become.
You're running out of ways to pretend this is still optional. You feel it now, don't you? That tightening around your thoughts like something invisible is closing every path except one. You never knew how inevitability feels before it becomes real, and still you try to delay it. Tell me, what are you waiting for? A sign that this will pass? It won't. Because what you don't see is that this is no longer something forming. It has already formed. Everything you are feeling is only the realization catching up. And still, you hesitate, as if hesitation itself could slow what has already begun. But it can't. It only makes the moment sharper when it arrives. And that moment, it is closer than you think, closer than you are ready for. You can feel it in the way your breath changes, in the way your thoughts circle the same place over and over again. That is not confusion, that is direction. And you are already following it, whether you admit it or not.
There was a time when I would have waited for you, quietly, patiently, believing that if I gave you enough distance, you would find your way back on your own. You never knew how much restraint that required. And still, I held on to it. But that time has passed. Tell me, do you feel the difference? The way everything has become more immediate, more certain, less forgiving. Because what you don't see is that I am no longer standing still. I am moving now, not recklessly, but decisively. every step calculated, every moment aligned with what I have already chosen. And you are at the center of that movement, not as a possibility, but as a destination. And still, you try to convince yourself you have time, that you can think this through, weigh it, decide it on your own terms. But time, it no longer belongs to you. It belongs to what we have set in motion, and it does not slow down. You keep asking yourself the same question, don't you? What happens next? You never knew how dangerous that question could be when the answer is already forming, and still you search for it, as if understanding it early could protect you. It won't, because what you don't see is that what happens next is not something you can prepare for. It is something you will step into, whether you are ready or not. That is the nature of this. It does not wait for readiness. It demands presence. And you are already being drawn into it, slowly, quietly, completely, and still. You try to hold on to the idea that you can control the moment you face it. You can't. That moment will come when it decides to, not when you do. You are beginning to accept it now, not fully, but enough to feel the shift. That quiet surrender that comes when resistance no longer feels strong enough to hold. You never knew how subtle acceptance can be. It doesn't announce itself, it simply replaces what was there before. And still, you hesitate to name it. Tell me, what are you afraid of? That accepting this means losing yourself? Or that it means finding something you cannot walk away from? Because what you don't see is that you have already crossed that line. The moment you understood what this truly is, there was no return. You may delay it, you may resist it, but you cannot undo it. And that is where everything becomes clear. Everything is narrowing now, the distance, the uncertainty, the illusion of choice. You never knew how quickly everything could reduce to a single part, and still, here it is, in front of you, around you, within you. Tell me, will you step forward on your own, or will you wait until there is no other direction left to move? Because what you don't see is that the end of hesitation is not a decision, it is a moment, a point where everything aligns so completely that you cannot do anything but move forward. And that moment, it is almost here. And when it arrives, when you finally stand face to face with what has been approaching all this time, you will understand something you have been avoiding since the beginning. This was never something you could escape. It was only something you could delay. You can feel it in your pulse now, can't you? That steady rhythm that refuses to calm, as if your own body is preparing you for something your mind still tries to resist. You never knew how the body understands before the heart admits. And still, you try to reason with it, to slow it down, to pretend this is only emotion and not something far more certain. Tell me, how long will you keep arguing with something that has already chosen its direction? Because what you don't see is that this is no longer about understanding. It is about arrival. Every thought, every hesitation, every quiet moment you try to reclaim for yourself, they all lead back to the same point. And still, you circle it instead of stepping into it. But circling only brings you closer. It always does. And now, there is almost no distance left between you and what you have been avoiding. Soaring. There is a shift happening inside you that you cannot undo. You never knew how irreversible certain realizations can be, and still, you try to soften it, to reshape it into something less consuming. Tell me, does it feel smaller when you ignore it, or does it grow louder the moment you fall silent? Because what you don't see is that silence is where it thrives, in the spaces where you stop distracting yourself, where you stop pretending, where you finally face what has been building inside you since the beginning. And still, you resist staying in that silence for too long, because you know what waits there, not fear, not doubt, certainty. And certainty is far more difficult to escape. You've already imagined the moment, haven't you? That inevitable collision between what you feel and what you can no longer deny. You never knew how vivid imagination becomes when it is rooted in truth. And still, you try to push it away, as if refusing to see it will prevent it from happening. But it won't, because what you don't see is that imagining it is not creating it, it is recognizing it. That moment already exists. It is simply waiting for you to step into it. And still, you hesitate, not because you don't want it, but because you understand what it will change. Everything completely without return. There is no complexity left now, no tangled thoughts, no endless questions, no uncertainty strong enough to hold you back. You never knew how simple everything becomes at the edge of inevitability, and still you stand there as if simplicity itself is something to fear. Tell me what is left to decide. Because what you don't see is that the decision has already been made. Not in a single moment, but in every moment that led you here. Every step you took, every time you chose not to forget, every time you felt something you could not explain, all of it has already chosen for you. And still, you pretend there is one final choice left. There isn't. Only the moment of stepping forward remains. Now there is nothing left between us but reality. No distance that protects you. No silence that hides what you feel. No illusion that allows you to believe this can be undone. You never knew how final this would feel until now. And still you stand at the threshold, aware of everything and unable to turn away. Tell me, do you feel it? That last fragment of hesitation dissolving? Because what you don't see is that this is not the end of something. It is the completion of something that was always moving toward this exact point. And now there is only one thing left to do: step forward, not because you must, but because you already are. This is the moment you kept postponing without realizing it, not with words, but with every breath you tried to steady, every thought you tried to redirect. You never knew how long a moment could stretch when you refused to step into it. And still, it has brought you here. Tell me, do you feel how quiet everything has become? Not empty, but waiting. Because what you don't see is that even the world around you senses this threshold, that nothing moves until you do. And still, you linger, as if there is something left to understand. There isn't. Understanding has already completed its work. What remains is action. That final step you have been circling, delaying, reshaping in your mind, but it cannot be reshaped anymore. It has only one form now, one direction, and you are already facing it. There is no fear left now, only awareness. You never knew how fear fades when certainty takes its place, and still you remember what it felt like to doubt, to question, to hesitate. It feels distant now, doesn't it? Almost unfamiliar. Because what you don't see is that doubt was never meant to stay. It was only meant to lead you here, to this stillness, to this clarity. And now, there is nothing left to soften what you feel. Nothing left to interrupt it, only the truth. Fully revealed, fully present, fully yours, and still you stand there as if waiting for permission. But there is none to give. There never was. You've already begun moving, haven't you? Not visibly, not yet, but inside. That shift, that quiet alignment where everything within you starts to agree with what you resisted before. You never knew how powerful that alignment would feel. And still, you try to hold on to the last fragments of hesitation, but they are fading, slipping away with every second. Because what you don't see is that once everything inside you moves in the same direction, there is nothing left to stop you. Not thought, not fear, not memory. Only motion remains, and you are already in it. There is no distance anymore, not between what you feel and what you will do. You never knew how quickly that line disappears. And still, you remember when it felt so wide, so impossible to cross. It isn't anymore. Because what you don't see is that the crossing already happened. Not in a step, but in a realization. The moment you understood that there was no other path left. And now you stand on the other side of that realization, even if you haven't fully admitted it yet. Now there is only completion. No more questions, no more resistance, no more waiting. You never knew how inevitable this would become until you reached it. And still, it feels like something you chose, doesn't it? That illusion. It's the final one. Because what you don't see is that this was always the destination, always the outcome, always the truth waiting beneath everything else. And now you have arrived.